Hello and welcome to Sage Thyme. Lillian here with you today. As I work with the energies of the collective at this present time, here at the last day of March 2023, in connection with some rather distinct and clear and specifically strong downloads of information from Spirit. Now, it'll be an interesting thing to see how this all comes through. As I was receiving all this information and scribbling it through, writing the flow of messages out, and then putting it into a more coherent or cohesive, I should say, format so that I could share the information as best as possible, Spirit did this lovely thing that I have been receiving and being blessed with as part of my current training, and just put a silencer and dampened the whole thing, almost to the point where I can hardly read my own notes and pull anything specifically from what I was told. And what I have been finding is what a valuable format of learning this has been for me as an individual, and I imagine many of you can relate to this. As somebody who I loved to have things organized. I loved binders. I loved, if my presentations, I wanted them outlined and succinct and in the right flow. And that really was the way and not just with verbal things and presentations, but that was probably my modus operandum for all things, if I think about it, throughout my life. For the most part, I had certain areas where I liked to be very freewheeling. Cooking is one of those. I'm like the Swedish chef of throwing things up in the air and seeing how they land in the pan and the pot. And I love that. Well, thank you, Spirit. What a great reminder. That is how I am being taught to present information. As much as I enjoy on one end, I like to be totally freeform with pulling tarot and allowing that message to come out on the fly. Don't always get all the information through that I want to, so it seems. Although everything is in divine accordance, right? And then when I get these big messages and I write them all out, they're so overtly detailed that I expect it would be easy for the listener to get lost in just the sheer information, perhaps even convolution of it all. So I'm getting a combination template, shall we say, of these things. Okay, enough preemptive rambling. I did pull a few cards from the Beyond Lemuria deck. It's a very fitting deck for the message that's coming through today. The message I think is coming through. And I pulled out the Spirit Song Tarot, and before I even had a chance to shuffle, one card did come out. And I believe this is in a lot of ways a strong premise to what we will be discussing today. So we've got the Queen of Feathers, Perception and Truth. This is an air sign card, as you can see by the triangle with the line through the top. So Queen of Air would be the general tarot. And we have this beautiful bat flying through what is a lot more complex and intricate and layered of the empty, what we perceive as the empty space of darkness and night. And she is the Queen of Feathers, is perceiving truth, because it's essential, right, for a bat to be able to navigate through the darkness using resonance of sonar, sound frequency, and receiving that ricochet back from various moving and stationary solid forms, so that she doesn't bonk her head or catch her wings in something that she doesn't want to. So let's let that be the overarching archetype of this reading, in a sense, I think. Let's see how this goes. I'm only uncertain to the sense that it's fun to be more and more uncertain, and I have to just say really quickly, thank you everybody for being here today with me on this journey as I'm exploring what it is to present information to you as it is being brought to me in a very undefined, open-hearted, reverent, and child mind, beginner's mind way. This is a beautiful teaching manner of being for me, and it is my hope that it is a wonderful mirror and or inspiration for all of you, or at the very least a validation of what you're already doing if it doesn't enhance and expand that. And so thank you for being here, and thank you for those who tap that like button and leave comments. This is and will be maintained as a safe space to be able to share your perspectives, thoughts, feelings, and emotions in a way that comes from the personal self that is you. And the only thing that's not tolerated on this channel is intolerance. And when I say that, that is simply in the sense of intolerance will be lovingly asked to look for a more suitable space to be in rather than here, perhaps. So here we go, little tangent there. I will start with the 4 cards that came out from the Beyond Lemuria deck. Actually, no. Oh my gracious. Okay. The title that came through, that you'll probably see in the title description below this video, is Consecrating the Temple, the Self-Made Sacred. So, there's a lot of really wonderful words in that statement. Consecrating the temple, the self-made sacred. And yet all of those words can be combined into one. That one word, 2, I suppose, being the holy self. And you can spell it biblically, Holy. I have been enjoying for some time spelling holy with a W, as in a state of being whole, holy. And to me, they, I feel, are intended to mean the same thing. Another word that we often hear used in fields like naturopathic medicine, earth-based natural medicine, alternative medicine, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, whole foods as medicine, and so on and so forth, herbal medicine. All those distinct approaches have the same philosophy within them, and that is a whole approach of the healthy human. And all of them integrate the intelligence of whatever they're using, be it plant, be it psychic, be it acupuncture needles and meridians, and so forth, and the intelligence of the body, which is an incredibly intelligent unit, and the heart, and the heart of, I want to make a distinction here. The emotion of the plant, the emotion of the body, the awareness of the plant, the consciousness, the awareness, the consciousness of the body, and then the spirit of all those distinctions, the plant or the needle, and the intention of the practitioner, meeting the intention as a resonant frequency from both of the patient and the point itself, and everything that that point represents among the 360 main points, 500 plus total points within the body, and combining those things wholly, as well as other things. And that wholeness, which we refer to alternative medicine as holistic, H-O-L, holistic. That wholeness includes the spirit of all of those different things, combined and separate, like throwing pebbles in a pond in different locations and watching the waves, the ripples that are created on the surface of that pond coming together in one location. And at that location, that is the whole combined frequency of all the, I was going to say integers, of all the components, of all the rocks that were thrown in different parts. And so if you think about how not just each one of us, not just each part of us, and each plant and animal and element that we encounter on multiple levels have many different frequencies and amplitudes within. The body itself has, your body, my body, distinctly has its own resonant frequency and amplitude. And that is a combination of all the organs, all the neurological avenues and outlets, every cell, every mitochondria, every electron and proton, each and every big conglomerate, whether it's the liver or the heart, is a conglomeration of infinite, multiple resonances within it. And that liver creates its own distinct resonance, which then meets up with the other more gross, larger conglomerates, the kidney, the lungs, and they all combined their little ripples in the pool, in the pond, to create one, and that one being you, me. Of course, the brain's involved and all sorts of other things. And so that is the whole, the holy self. And to be in a holistic state is to have those multitudes of resonances creating a harmonic within the individual self. There we go. Just wondering where that was going to come in. The sound of the universe. Creating a harmonic, an orchestrated song that can or cannot necessarily work with the surrounding harmonics of what the individual soul, the conscious self, wants to engage with. And so to choose consciously to be in a healthy, homeostatic, life giving and receiving circuitry of a being in a way that is, to use a phrase that we often use, that is in the best and highest good, the best and highest truth of our divine design, is to be in resonance as that. So if there's discord in somebody's life, with encountering somebody at the grocery store, with something that's going on with your 10-year-old, with a partner, with a family member, and the memories of them, even if you aren't seeing them, if there's discord with someone at your work, or simply in what you consume, watching the news or commercials or television, consuming the food that we eat. I mean, this could go on, and I don't want to like barrage everybody. I think that it's pretty clear we can spend time in quiet reflection and think about all these different things, feel into all these different things that we consume and interact with, whether it's conversations or drinking a coffee, and how that might affect our holistic resonance. And in doing so, how that holistic resonance is reverberating with the song of the universe, the divine tone of the universal orchestration, one that is synchronistic and in symmetry and fluctuating, expanding and contracting, shifting and growing, but always ultimately in a symmetry. You can think of it as a 3-dimensional or even 5-dimensional shapes within shapes, geometric shape that shifts and moves and expands and creates extensions like a snowflake, and within it and out beyond it. And so all of that shape has a tone, has a song to it, an orchestration, and that is what is calling us as it evolves, the everything of all. It is calling us to meet it and match it, which is why so many of us, well, all of us ultimately, but so many of us are more and more becoming aware of that pull, that call to stretch ourselves, to feel the intensity of restriction in areas that we are vibrating or moving that is in discord with the great divine design that is Source All. So we feel these tension spots, we feel this feedback mechanism of the universe more intensely right now, because the universe, I hypothesize, is itself expanding and developing and growing in ways that is so much more than where we are right now as a holographic, more minor fractal of it. But we are each a universe within the universe, right? And so in the universe, another thing I've spent time with Spirit on, it's expanding because we as a collective, not just the humans, not just life forms on Earth, but we'll just use that for now, have been calling that requirement upon the great design of Source. We have been calling for something better, something more, to become something more evolved than what we've been, and we're seeing the results of it. Now, it's a little sketchy at times, it feels and appears, with acts of violence and counteracts of oppression and just, you know it. You could watch the news, it's all there. Or even go outside and interact with folks. It's happening in the world, and that is part of the egg cracking process. That is part of the digging in the dirt in early spring to pull up the nutrients from down below and flip the dirt over and allow everything to open up and new nutrients to be exposed and regenerate. Okay, that was a bit of a tangent, but let's keep going. See, this is what happens when I go freeform. It gets a little tricksy for me, and I thank you for your patience. So, consecrating the temple, the self made sacred. The temple and the self being synonymous in this sense. And I like bringing in the idea of consecrating the temple. That's something that all of us are very familiar with, whether your spiritual philosophy or religion is Christianity, or you're a yogi, or you practice pagan earth medicine, or Aborigine medicine, or First Nation earth medicine, Mayan culture, philosophy, religion, and medicine. Regardless of what your reference of the temple is outside of yourself, it is clear that the temple is always at its most true, direct connection with the source that is all. The sacred temple is the body of the self, of each individual self. And so consecrating, making sacred the temple of the self makes a lot of sense, right? It seems When I first started spending time with this phrase, consecrating the temple that is myself, making myself sacred, I kind of went, well, duh, yeah. And then I heard the question, what does that mean to you? And it became a really integral and essential part of my healing process, rather miraculous, not even rather, very significantly miraculous on multiple levels process of healing and coming back to life from number of accounts that would say that's not possible. And the question that was posed to me by Spirit, by my higher self, of what does it mean to you to make yourself sacred? The response was delightfully surprising, because it wasn't big. It wasn't rituals and ceremony and anointing and cleansing and prayer and reverence. It was all of those things, but it wasn't, those weren't the agenda. Those things happened as breathing. The act of breathing requires air. It just happens. They happen together. And yes, they require each other, but it's not planned. And so I was repeatedly told and deterred from doing any forms of rituals or ceremonies that were prescribed or traditional or done by anybody else. I was strictly directed to make it up as I go, and even to the extent where, like these talks, it couldn't be planned, generally speaking, especially not in the first few years. It had to be a opening of allowing the connection with my spiritual self, my higher self, God and Source, that opening and allowing the information to come in, maintaining that state of presence so the information and the energetic flow of that could maintain itself within my beingness and guide me, move me from within, filling me with this etheric fluid of spirit to such an extent that my entire physical body was filled like a animated gel, filling the physical form and all the tiny minute nuances down to the cells and what's within the cells and so forth. And simply allowing that practice to occur and taking the steps to allow that practice, that experience to occur, was what tuned me into hearing greater wisdom and direction, and completely shifting not only my life and how I approach it, but shifting the materialization of miracles, like my body healing in ways that scientifically would say no. And so that is the whole self, the holistic self, the holy with a WH or an HOLY, the holy self. And when I do that, and when I get in that state, there is a lesson to be learned about what I was given in the term holistic integrity. And I'm actually being guided not to go into that quite yet. So I'm going to hopefully put a pin in that and come back to that later in today's talk or another time. So I want to go back to what it is to make the self sacred. And if there were steps to begin that process, there's so much information coming in right now. I'm trying to stay focused on each thing at a time. But if there were steps to make the self sacred, to yoke all parts of the beingness that is you, yoke being the root word literal translation of yogi, to bring together, all parts of the self. The steps would be what answers the question, what does it truly mean? And how does it truly feel to be sacred? And where do you start? What brings you to the sense of sacred? So for me, the first thing that I was able to come to in the external world, so because I am, and definitely was, still somebody who was perceiving reality as what's going on around me versus what's going on within me. And so in the external world, the things that bring me to that sacred space right away are things like children, our pets, animals, and nature itself. And so the next question is, well, how is it that you hold that sense of sacred space in the presence of a child, in the presence of a pet or an animal or in nature? And I instantly went to the state of presence, holding my beingness and my body in a state that reins in time, that stills thoughts, quiets the thinking mind, and holds my attention, my sight within my body, and doing different variations of things like scans within the body, feeling what it feels like to not feel with your fingers, but for your fingers to feel. So if you're just simply in the air, what does it feel like for the skin of the fingers to feel air? Or if you're touching a sheet, something inanimate, what is the tip of my right index finger experiencing when I touch this paper? And spending time with that. That is the beginning level of presence and awareness that I'm talking about. And being in that state of presence throughout your entire body and being, when in a magical moment with a child or an animal or nature revealing itself in such a profound and dynamic way, it's intuitive, it's natural, it becomes you. Yet to cultivate the ability to do that in all moments. And I'm thinking the jagged moments, the fiery moments, the challenger moments, the moments that bring us back to our old programs and patterns of limitation and just ill discord. Being able to hold that state of conscious inner sight awareness within the entire body allows a person to maintain their state as the witness, and allows a person to activate the heart space more intensely and intently. And the reason why the heart space, in collaboration with the entire body and being, why the heart space is so important and essential is that when we connect with spirit, our higher selves, or other, being in the heart space and feeling all of that, maintaining all of that with the intention of higher love, divine love, allows an assurance that that's what we'll be working with. Because as many people know, even in the psychic and astral and imaginal realms and all the other realms that we can possibly see or feel or know of, interact with, there are some ooky things within that. And so maintaining presence within the heart is the divine portal, if you will, and consciousness, conscious presence there, and the allowance and surrender to hold and maintain that conscious presence in a trust state. That's the key that opens the lock that is the heart. And so that presence within time and space, and then presence within the heart space is then what opens the body and being to receiving the ideal, at least according to me, and those that have been teaching me, the ideal nature of optimal fulfillment, and more so optimal concordance with the divine design. And we can defer. We have that choice. We've heard it biblically and scientifically and theoretically or theologically. We have free will, most definitely. And that doesn't always work out so well when we use that free will in that wanton way that comes with being simply uninformed, being naive and even ignorant, which in truth, in the most heartfelt, loving way, we are all at any given point of our development as humans, as spiritual beings and beyond, until consciousness returns to the whole of the ocean of source itself. We are all at stages of naivety and ignorance. We don't know until we don't know. Such are each step of our journey, and sometimes the steps ascend and sometimes they descend in a sense of inward and outward, but they can't go in one direction and extension of that direction without having gone in the other direction and extension within. And that's the inner deepening exploration, the internal explorer, the beauty way found in all polarities of all things, and that recognition of the depth and the essential requirement of those polarities in such a way that one can bring them together and reconcile them. And in that reconciliation, just like bringing sweet and savory together, in the combination of those two seemingly opposite things, when done in a, I'll say intuitive, in a source-connected, higher self-connected sense, there is an alchemy that occurs, a combination and a layering of them, and it develops into something so much different and unique. It isn't a food that is sweet and savory, although those distinctions can be made. It's something entirely different and new in and of itself. And so that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing when we're making ourselves sacred. We're going deep and looking at the parts that, social constructs and conditioning and programs will say that's bad, that's evil, that's dark, that's harsh, that's cruel. Well, yes, and also so much more. And it's important, first of all, to remember that good and bad are important and necessary social constructs, standards that we create for us to have society that is safe. We create rules so that we can live within a paradigm that allows us to live more safely within that paradigm, learn and explore. And then when that paradigm gets boring, it's been done, we've learned it all, then we start stretching, expanding the extensions of what was acceptable and allowed. And so that can be interpreted in all sorts of different ways, depending on the perspective, of course. And that brings us to the idea of other cultures that talk about things that we would associate with good and bad, or bad and good. Dark and light is a big phrase that's used, love and light, and avoid the shadow or the darkness and things like that. And I want to touch on briefly in Chinese medicine and philosophy and theory, yin versus yang, yin being the darkness, yang being the light. You've heard me talk about in previous videos all the different components that make up yin and all the different components that make up yang. And we know the symbol of the yin and the yang symbol, the dark and the light with the opposing dots within. And the thing about the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, the contractive and the expansive, is not only is good and bad not associated or affiliated with those things entirely, they are both within both, and you've heard me discuss that as well. And in Chinese medicine and in the Chinese culture as well, at least in ancient Chinese culture, yin, the darkness, the feminine, the contractile, the creatrix, the matter, the creatrix of form, the cold, the vacuous, has variations of what is considered excess or deficiency. So yin, in a pathological state, is either in yin excess or yin deficiency. And the same goes with yang. So yang, the light, the heat, the excessive, the chaos, the righteous, the over-impositioning would be some of the ideas of a yang excess. And yang also has deficiencies. Well, I'm not going to go into all of that. It's just so much information. But I think what's really wonderful to recognize is that within the dark and the light, when there is balance, and in Chinese medicine, there is always a recognition of striking balance. So if you're a smoker and you're having a lot of dry heat, creating a yang deficiency, I believe if I'm remembering this correctly, then to counter that would be something equal to that, like ice cream, cold and damp. Now we've got two different counterbalances that are both toxic, quite frankly, if done in any manner of repetitiveness or excessiveness. But if one time you have a cigarette and you counter it with ice cream, the cold and damp, the body can return to its more balanced, higher level homeostasis and balance pretty readily. But if that's your mainstay or any variation of it, then the body has to fight to maintain a much lower field of balance. And then that's when more pathology comes in. So again, how does that work with us? I mean, that's pretty easy to say, okay, I get that. If I'm watching a lot of Fox News and it's creating anxiety and tension and probably a yang excess, then I want to counter it with fishing all day. In and of itself, fishing seems fine. But if all you do is fish, then it, of course, becomes a pathology, because there's more to living, there's more to the body and mind and heart's needs than to simply fish all day. Especially the true counterbalance to that would be fishing with a cork on your hook, would be what the Chinese would say. So, to make the self sacred is to bring in an more authentic, genuine integrity of the whole self, a holistic integrity. So, what is integrity? Integrity is kind of the rebar to a building. It is what holds the building up in place in structure. Can't remember the exact definition of integrity, but basically it goes along with something like what you the building, or you the human, what you say you are, what you represent yourself as, and how you maintain yourself. If they are in integrity, then that means they are, and they continue to be what they say they are. So if you say you're somebody that is trustworthy and reliable, but you're not always on time, or you're not present and listening, or I can't think of another right now, then there are areas of your life that you are not reliable and trustworthy. And so what will happen then is you'll start coming across people who are unreliable and untrustworthy, but in different ways, most likely. And the universe likes to have a good jab and joke with us on that sense of, it'd be easy if it was in a realm or a category, you know, if we're like, what's time? I don't need to be on time. Time is a construct, and I'm not conforming, and da-da-da-da-da-da. There's much more important things. But to the person who's a single parent or running a corporation, time is really important to them, and they made it clear, and you agreed, and you didn't show up or whatever, and you dismissed it. Pura vida, no big deal, right? It's pure life. And so the universe won't counter that for you and bring it into your awareness with the same obvious thing. Because if it was other people just not showing up on time, you're like, cool, you don't, I don't, it's good. It'll be something that's important to you. Something that is integral to your own personal integrity and maintaining that sense of relaxation, and it's all good. And life is to be done with ease. So someone will come in with something. And in order to have an experience of holistic integrity of the world around us, an experience of being able to rely on the universe working with us in a way that coincides with who we choose to be. If I choose to be somebody who is kind and doesn't cause harm, you know, these sorts of things, and I want to work in a field and with the universe in a way that doesn't attack or doesn't say and do unkind things, then I have to check and make sure that all aspects of myself are in that, we'll say, consideration of cause and effect mode, and to what degree, and how that works together. And so the components of something like holistic integrity within the self come together with what I say, what I think, consciously and subconsciously, what I feel, what I emote, what I do, how I behave, and the spiritual integration within all those things, the cosmic agreement within the design of my divine plan of all those things. And when I'm not in integrity, if I am a kind person and I claim that, and part of the reason why I claim that as an I am is I am creating a construct of kindness. But if my thoughts, consciously or unconsciously, are not kind, regardless of it being an understandable thing, like if I've had trauma in my past, severe, mild, regardless, if I've had trauma that I haven't, or loss and grief or betrayal or irritations that I didn't process, which is pretty much all of us on countless levels of things in modern society. I didn't process and work through that consciously, those feelings and thoughts and experiences and emotions, and bring them to my conscious awareness so that they could be processed and released. Then they get shoved down into the dark caverns of the subconscious, the unconscious, and they run their racket. It's like the after-school play yard with all the bullies waiting around to pick on all the like gentle-hearted and vulnerable ones. They're just running a shit show in the shadows of my being, in the yin of my being, in the quiet, still, unattended areas of my being. So what happens, we have circumstances that try to activate that in us. Whenever there's an emotional and or intellectual reaction on my part, it is the universe saying, knock, knock, knock. That's inside of you. And you, Lillian, asked to become a greater, more whole person and have a better life. You asked to live the best version of yourself, or even a better version of yourself. Well, we can't really get there until you dig deep as the inner architect and start pulling out the plug and pulling out those yucky, I'm seeing those hairballs at the bottom of or in the drain of the bathtub. You pull that out, get that out. But you can't until you acknowledge that it's there. And then you pull it out, you work with it and release it. Send it off. And so that's the cue. When there's something that, as we like to use the word triggers the individual, that's the cue. Oh, that's something. Now, of course, there's other nuances and minutiae within, like not recognizing things, but it becomes pretty evident pretty quickly when a person opens the door on a path to a better life in any sense, whether it's abundance, health, relationship, clarity, on and on. So that's the hidden subconscious aspects that can interfere with a person being in holistic integrity. What about the emotions? Same thing. We have the emotions that we feel. We also have the emotions that we've shoved. And those, of course, eventually generally become either pathologies within the self, or if we dump them in other people's front yards and consciousnesses and bodies, then it becomes a part of their sickness. And so the emotional state, whether you turn it within on yourself, autoimmune disorders, or you project it out onto others, psychosis, psychological disorders would be some of them, some of the things that you would see, or violence, or verbal assaults, even passive aggressive, right? Behaving, another thing. If a person is dissociated and they're not in connection of their conscious and subconscious into the heart, along with the lower chakras of safety and creative expression and self-worth, if those are not all in cleansed and cleared and whole states, then both the inner landscape of illness and pathology, illness and even pain, shoulder joint immobilization, needing knee replacement, those kinds of things, they all represent different parts of cues and clues and fractaling holographs of what's going on in what is lacking in the balance of holistic integrity. I hope this is making sense to everybody. I'm trying to take my time with it because I want to make sure I'm getting all the points of it, and hopefully it's not too mundane. Well, it is or it isn't. That'll be fine. I'd love to hear your feedback. So anyways, so how we're behaving and how we're consciously aware of it. Again, are you in a practice of presence in stillness throughout your day, every day, so that when you're in active motion, that presence can readily and easily be pulled in from the back state of the consciousness. And in a sense, I think of it as like the brainstem and the spinal cord. It brings that presence awareness all the way through and fills the body, opening the self to spiritual embodiment and the me self into a conscious awareness state, so that the behavior and the thinking and the emotional states are now open, presenced into awareness, and available for spirit to come join the party. Now we've got holistic integrity. So how do we get there? Because I'm going to make a guess here. None of us are there. We're working on it. And in some areas, I expect some of you are really exceeding on some days. And others is like, what just happened? Well, back kind of to those steps, getting present, using the heart as an anchor, as a portal, a doorway with a lock and a key. The key being your consciousness, the heart being the lock, and allowing those things to open up and create that divine love portal and anchor, so that then we can sustain ourselves in the witness state, in the beginner's mind, in the child of God. The Holy Spirit would be another term that would be synonymous. And then sustaining that witness state as a constant state, more and more. We practice it, we become it. We don't fake it till we make it. We practice it until we become it, right? And once we become it, there's a new practice to develop. So we practice it, and we enjoy the practice as much as possible. And the parts that don't feel like we would call it enjoyment, we can respect it and have reverence, and knowing that it's sacred and holding that sense of sacredness. And then from that point, the uncomfortable, the not so pleasant, not so enjoyment is actually unbound from its bindings, and it blossoms and blooms within us, and it becomes something more pleasant. And just kind of peeking here, I wrote down why do we do that? I feel like I've discussed that, and I'm curious to hear from all of you why you would find it important to consecrate the self as holistic, as holy, as open, present, available, anchored in the truth of what your intention is. The heart space, I would presume, it's a lot more pleasant of a ride. Why would you do that? And what are some of the ways that you do it? I mentioned earlier that when I was at the beginning of my intense, we'll call it healing process, I call them healing days. When I feel like I'm being ripped apart, those are my healing days, because they are activating all kinds of layers and dimensions of healing within me and throughout me. And one of the first guidances I received in a clear and obvious way was to take contrast showers, hot cold contrast. And I learned this in Skills Lab in naturopathic medicine, first year, probably first quarter, in fact. And there's different ways of using hydrotherapy, but without any equipment, and being as sick as I was, just getting in the shower and doing a basic self-care was so essential. And what occurs with that, I knew on a physiological level, I know that you start with hot, you end with cold, and there's times and a time frame for each one, and then you do 3 rounds of that. But it creates a lymphatic flush amongst many other things. It also activates the immune system. And so I started doing that. I would do my 3 minutes of hot, not too hot, but almost as hot as I could handle it. And then 30 seconds, I'd turn the shower to ice cold. 30 seconds of very, very cold. Again, it's not with equipment, and you have to be careful. I didn't always do it straight to ice cold at first. I had to let my constitution be strong enough to handle it. So I do those 3 rounds of that. And what I started finding relatively quickly was that, number one, it exhausted me. So I rested more deeply and with a better renewingness to it. It increased my immune system, of course, over time. And it created a bunch of different things. But one of the most beautiful things that came through, it was the next link of conversation between spirit in making myself sacred, consecrating my body. And I kept hearing that. I kept, maybe not those words at first, but it was something to the effect of, love yourself. Feel yourself being loved. And, I'll do that in prayer. I'll do that in meditation. I'll do that while gardening. But doing that while in a state of mind-bending, body ripping apart pain that's chronic. And I'm not the only person who goes through that. And there's a lot of variations of it, most definitely. But when a person's in that kind of pain, and it's that chronic, and then maybe add in some hyperadrenic, post-traumatic stress kind of things, chronic post-traumatic stress, then you've got a feeling of fear that's far beyond the word fear, and pain that supersedes pain in unimaginable ways. And to be able to touch spirit love on a regular basis, on a in the moment of feeling tortured basis, and feel spirit loving you in those moments can be challenging. And so I would start hearing these guidances, and in the shower was the first one in that sense of being active and feeling myself slow time, be present in a different way, and having that cold flush brings a person's consciousness in greater concentration into their being, most definitely. And then I turn it to the warm, and I would experience every single, at least it felt like it, every single droplet of the shower touching my skin, like little tickles of love, where before it was excruciating to feel anything on my skin, even water. Now it felt like little droplets of hug kisses and light healing love, and I would let my skin feel those feelings and have a conversation with the appropriate receptors on my skin, and what does that feel like? And I would just experience this sensation that can only be said in words like love and glee and sensual and sacred and cherished. All the things that bring about, that describe what it is to be in divine connection with the higher self, the God self, God source, the divine all. And so that took on a new life for me. I started doing that, of course, with food, mindful eating, mindful cooking, and it started to become, I'd have to make sure I was putting myself in present state and in flow first, especially if I was getting busy or distracted, or one of any other things that pull us apart from being fully present and conscious. And now when I cook, I can cook for half a day or a quarter of the day, and it's the entire thing from front to back is a ritual. It's ceremony, from bringing out the groceries to, pulling the stems off the parsley, to connecting with the rice grain in my pot, feeling and even sometimes intellectually hearing the stories of that grain of brown rice that came from hundreds of thousands of years of experience and interaction with the elements and the hands and the hearts and the plants and animals and insects and the sun. And being able to be in that state of holistic integrity, holy presence, wholeness of self in connection with the heart and the all, starts opening up the inner being into an interactive field of the present common reality that is so unique, so deep, in rich depth and indescribable experiences and wisdoms. There is, I feel, no abundance, no romance, no gift or blessing greater than that. It is the consecrated self, the sacred, holy integration of the self within the body is the union of the highest love and relationship and gift and abundance and wealth and health that there is. It is it. It's all of it. And to be in all of that is to invite it in more. Because as we hear our wonderful Victoria from Veritas Tarot say, gratitude brings in more gratitude. To be in a state of feeling, accepting and receiving and experiencing the purity and divinity of Source, whatever that is, from stirring a pot to putting lotion on your hands, to taking an herbal capsule of lion's mane mushroom and connecting with that, whatever it is, connecting with that from your heart space is to be in that state of gratitude, which is to invite more of it in, more of what brings more gratitude. So let me just kind of peek at this. I feel like I uncovered all the most important parts of it. There is this. I wrote about hidden truths versus freedom. Let's see what I said. Once you've uncovered, dusted off, and fully revealed the hidden or denied aspects of the self, then there comes an understanding and an acceptance that those dark crevices within the yin of the self are all part of it, all part of the experience. The cruelty, the negligence, the hypocrisy, all the things that we didn't know we were doing. And we think we weren't doing it as bad as somebody else who's doing it in a way that's more obvious. Because we don't see the things that we do that are hurtful, harmful, negligent, cruel. We don't see the tangents, the rippling effect of how deeply that has hurt another or others that we don't see, that we don't know about. We don't feel all the people who are hurt every time we buy a tank of gas. Some of us do now. Some of us are going through and have gone through those experiences on every level, from buying a pencil at a mega store to eating animal, or more so eating, unfairly, inhumanely treated animals, those kinds of things. Simple to obvious. We don't see it, we don't feel it. And so when we see something, and this is a hard thing to make a comparison to, and I know I'm treading on delicate waters, because to say that, buying a pencil at a superstore is the same as a blood diamond, or the same as going in and taking an assault rifle to a building full of children. They're not the same thing. But it could be, and I've experienced how it is the same in how it affects so many people that we don't see and know. When it's somebody like a shooter, we see it. We can feel it in a more obvious sense. But for those who have gone through the experiences of digging deeply or being drugged down deeply into the underworld of their subconscious and into the videotape of lineages of how each and every choice that we make every day throughout our lives, how it affects so many people, then it gives pause to our choices. And it prioritizes reflection and the need and desire to be able to make better choices in a world where there's not really hardly any available choices that are good. All, it seems anyways, all these choices have horrific effects on everybody. And while some of that is simply a part of life, some of it, most of it, doesn't need to be. And that is one of the greatest causes and reasons to step into the threshold of the heart and integrate the holistic, Holy Spirit heart self. Because the more informed we are, the more we're able to make informed choice instead of making all these choices without really truly knowing. And when there's informed choice, then there's freedom. Because from the space of informed choice, we have looked at the truth of our denials, our negligences, our ignorances, our naiveties, and we've looked at it so deeply and in the sense of, well, how could I have done it any different? I didn't know that this would result in this and this and this, and that family in Indonesia would end up all the tortures and horrible things, and on, from this one choice that I made that is many choices, millions of choices that I've made so far throughout my life. How would I know that? And then you come to a place of, okay, there is a space for forgiveness because I understand, and now I'm informed. And once there's that allowance of self-forgiveness because you didn't know what you didn't know, and there's a loving acceptance that comes to the resolve, then the eyes, the trillions of eyes within the body open up to realizing that everybody, everywhere is thinking, acting, behaving, and feeling when in discord from a place of not knowing what they don't know. Even the ones who are aware and aware that they're doing it, there's a level of dissociation that cannot be described. A blinding of senses that our culture and our society require us to assimilate until the pressure point gets too tight and too intense and enough people say no, which is what's been happening. And so here we are in growing pains, the reverent, sacred, growing pains of becoming so much more in so many ways of the sacred self. So if you could take with you from this the idea of freeing oneself from their own bondage of judgment, the last judgment. By becoming a safe space, a space so sacred, so revered, so recognized as all the parts of all things, then that is a most extraordinary field of being that you can create for yourself, your own holodeck of your body and your visible and obvious world around you. And play with that. Connect and be still and get present and ask questions. And when you're in the heart and you ask a question with spirit, it doesn't even generally need to be formulated. Your heart already knows what the mind has been trying to get at and figure out. And so the heart just emits straight directly to a spirit what it is that needs to know, and in comes the information. And all you have to do is remain still and quiet in your mind and let it come in, and remain still and observe. Allow it to fill you, fulfill you, and move you from your heart and in connection with all others. So I thank you for being here and being a presence in these videos. I thank you for your thoughts and feedback, your experiences that you share from a place of openness and willingness to connect with yourself, with your sacred, and with each other. Thank you, everybody. Much love. Blessed be.